All right, so recently Anthony Jeselnik has been taking some shots at Bert and Tom and Andrew Schulz. On his podcast, he's been mocking some of their business decisions, and he usually doesn't mention their names at all, but if you keep up with this stuff, it's pretty obvious who he's talking about. And Anthony's also rumored to be a homeless cat, and he'll occasionally use Schaubisms on his podcast. And he also once mocked the way that Brendan and Brian addressed the whole Crystalia situation.
I have never, and I'm going to say this, I have never seen or heard of him doing anything illegal, ever. We've never been on the road with him. I was on the road with him about 14 years ago once when he was, just beginning, but I've never been on the road with him.
Central backers of Sound of Freedom was arrested for kidnapping. I don't know the guy that well. We had dinner a couple times. We've never been on the road together. I've never seen him do anything illegal. Go see Sound of Freedom, Aaron. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Name the waters.
This happened in Ohio.
No notes. Dicey.
Yeah, so he's definitely familiar with the Fighter and the Kid subreddit, and he's lucky he never got a call from Brian and Brendan threatening him about it. Brendan thought that Bobby Lee was running the subreddit with basically no proof that he was ever even on there. So I don't know what you think of this, but hopefully he learned his lesson with the whole Bobby Lee situation. It's not worth looking into. Hopefully he doesn't start gathering another 300 pages of evidence here. Because also I know in the past there's a moment where Anthony roasted Brendan right to his face. I don't think he's really trying to, but Brendan, of course, was just being annoying and kept trying to give him advice. So eventually Anthony had to just be like, all right, if I need career advice, I'll let you know. Like, you just leave me alone. And Anthony told this story on Trash Tuesday, and he didn't mention Brendan's name, but Mark Harley, he eventually confirmed it when he was on 10 Minutes of Schaub.
There was a comic who just kept giving me advice. This is like a couple months ago. Just kept being like, oh, you should do this as a podcast. You should do this. And I'm like trying to be polite for as long as I can. And finally I'm like, if I need any more career advice, I'll let you know. And the room laughed, and the guy was like, "Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry." And everyone was like, "That was really funny." I'm like, I wasn't trying to be mean, but he didn't give me any choice.
Yeah.
Referenced a time before when he was trying to give Anthony Jeselnik advice, and it was in front of other people, and he kind of framed it as oh yeah, Anthony snapped at me, but I'm like, well yeah, you were trying to he's one of the greatest living comics. He's kind of giving him because Brendan in his mind is oh well, I'm a business and marketing guy, so I'm trying to give Anthony Jeselnik advice, but he made it seem like he's Anthony's talking this way, and it's kind of hey Brendan, I think I got it. He gives him he says that and winks at him. I'm
right. Yeah, of course Brendan would do something like that, and I'm sure maybe he's trying to be a nice guy about it or something, but he just needs more self-awareness. He should realize he really shouldn't be giving anybody business advice, especially not somebody who is way more successful than him. And the funny thing is, Brendan's somebody that will not listen to any advice. He thinks he's got it all figured out and he knows what he's doing, but he could really use some help. And Mark said he would try to give him ideas and stuff, but he just doesn't want to listen. And I don't think he even listens to Rogan that much anymore either. During the whole Trug Walk thing, I'm sure Rogan was telling him to just ignore it and to let it die down, let people forget about it. And he also always tells him to just ignore the Fighter and the Kid subreddit. But of course, Brendan goes out and hires a team to investigate into it, and it just ends in a complete disaster. So like Rogan said, Brendan could really use a handler, and maybe he could have said that in a more polite way, but that's some good advice as well. So also there's another story that Brendan told on The Fighter and the Kid about how Anthony Jeselnik roasted him, and it sounds like it was a separate incident, unless Brendan is just completely misrepresenting what happened, which is definitely possible. But it sounds like there's another moment where Anthony went on stage after Brendan and then just started roasting him.
He was really nice to me, and then I went on first, and then I brought him out, and then he just roasted, we don't know each other that well, and roasted the fuck out of me. I was like, my feelings are so hurt. I'm like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah, he can sing.
But this was probably 2 or 3 years ago, and I didn't realize what kind of comic he was.
Yeah.
And then I went in the back, geez, man, freaking Jeselnik, and oh, that's what he does, dude.
Yeah,
that's his thing. I'm like, really? Yeah, of course that's his thing.
Yeah, so if that happened too, I'd imagine Brendan's probably not the biggest fan of Anthony Jeselnik, especially if he figures out that he goes on the Fighter and the Kid subreddit. But even with that, I'd imagine if you asked Brendan during a podcast what his relationship is like with Anthony Jeselnik, he'd probably say that they're best friends and they talk on the phone every single day. Like, that's his default response. But Brendan, he doesn't need to worry that much anymore because he's definitely being overshadowed now by Bert and Tom and their antics. Like, it's hard to top what these two are doing. I mean, Tom Segura selling his own vodka to his fans after calling them poors and losers is just hilarious. And it's like he's following Schaub's playbook, you know, trying to make all the wrong moves here. It's like, first you piss off all your fans, and then you give them a label like homeless cats or poors, and then you start selling them alcohol like Tiger Thick whiskey and Por Osos vodka. So it's not looking good for Tom. You know, I thought he'd be smart enough to possibly right the ship, but at this point, I'm not sure. You know, because it seems like Tom is more focused on thinking of different ways to make money than his comedy or podcasting. And it seems like he might turn into more of a salesman than a comedian. And Anthony Jeselnik has been making fun of him for it. You know, after Bert and Tom made their giant announcement on their podcast, Anthony started making some jokes on his own podcast about how he's going to start selling $70 bottleless water to his fans. And he also jokingly kept begging for money from his fans. So he's definitely throwing some shade at Tom and Bert here.
Because we host a podcast, we are entitled to all of your money.
Yep.
We make money from the podcast. Yes, we do have ads, and we're grateful for those. But it's not enough. When you decide to be a fan of a podcast, and when I say fan, I mean you listen to it once, you're locked in, fan for life. I'm going to need that money you got. It's not enough to come see me on tour or buy a product that we advertise on the show. It's not enough just to listen to it. Okay, it's not enough just to sign up for the YouTube channel. No, I'm gonna need that money. And not everyone's the same, fan-wise. There are some fans out there who have plenty of money, who are doing real well. Okay?
Right. The fans.
Yeah, so some fans who can easily give us money.
Too much money, if you ask me.
Too much money. We're gonna need some of it. If you don't have a lot of money, you're struggling to make ends meet with the bills, you got kids, you got a wife, you know, you're just trying to get through the week.
Right.
You know, I get it. But I also know, because I host a podcast and I have the wisdom that comes with that, I know you got something left over. Maybe it's a couple dollars. I'm going to need it.
Right.
I'm going to need the money. We've tried merch. It didn't go as well as we wanted. We didn't get all the money that way. If you're a fan of the podcast, big announcement, your life changes today. Greg and I have partnered, and we are selling JRVP bottleless bottled water. You hear that? It's bottleless. We're disrupting the bottles. Mm-hmm. You go to the Patreon, you buy the bottled water. Mm-hmm. $70. No bottle. Here's where we get you. It's unlimited.
And then also recently he referenced them crashing the Pat McAfee show. So it's funny that another comedian is roasting them, you know, somebody that has done their podcast before. And I don't think they'd really care. Like, I think they'd probably just find this funny. Like, maybe Bert might get offended by it if Rogan sends it to him like he did with Mark Maron trashing him a couple weeks ago. But Tom, at least, if he saw this, I'm sure he's just like, yeah, of course there are going to be comedians laughing at us. Like, he probably realizes what's going on, at least somewhat. And it's funny that Anthony's even referencing this on his podcast, you know, because I'm sure a good percentage of his fans don't even know what he's talking about. You know, they know he's joking, but they're probably like, what is this from? Like, what is he referencing here? But recently, when he brought up the Pat McAfee show, people probably figured it out, or they could at least look into it if they wanted to.
We did. I forgot all about it, but we weren't going to say anything. But we did sell a lot of JRVP bottled water at the Super Bowl. I don't know if you guys saw. Greg and I interrupted the Pat McAfee show to come on and pour like buckets of JRVP bottled water all over Malala, who was the guest at the time. It went viral. I'm sure you guys know about it. But thank you for buying the JRVP bottleless bottled water. We want all your money. We're going to get your money. And then we're going to get you that water.
Yeah, so I actually just saw on their subreddit that somebody had to explain the bottleless water bit because there's some people that didn't know what was going on. And those people are probably also confused when they heard Anthony talking about how he's going to charge his fans for a special and then release it on YouTube a day later because it's so controversial. referencing what Schulz did with his last special, like to promote it. He was talking about how controversial it was and how one of the streaming platforms wanted him to cut out jokes. So he bought it back and then he sold it as like a pay-per-view thing that you could buy. And it was available for like 2 weeks. And then a month or two after that, he just released it on YouTube. So his fans felt like they got ripped off. So Jeselnik, he was making fun of that on his podcast as well.
Deciding where it's going. Still figuring that out. But hopefully I'll have a decision by next week. I will let you guys know if it's going to be Netflix, Amazon, or maybe I'll charge my fans. Maybe I'll charge everybody $20 each to watch it. And then I'll put it on YouTube like a day later. How about that? How about I get $50 from everybody? Because it's so edgy. We'll see. Anyway,
yeah, so I'm sure most people, again, didn't really know what he was referencing there. But I don't know if any other comedians have called Schulz out on this, which is kind of surprising because it was a pretty scummy move from him. To keep saying that your special is only going to be available for 2 weeks and you have to buy it within that time frame, but once you buy it, you own it forever. Schulz was definitely implying that this would be your only opportunity to see it, and his fans obviously thought that, and that's why so many people bought it. He said he made a ton of money from it, but I guess it wasn't enough because then he ended up posting it to YouTube like a month or two later. So I'm kind of surprised more comedians didn't have a problem with that, but maybe they do and they just don't want to admit it. But if you want to hear more about that, I have a whole Patreon video about it. I'm only making it available for 2 more minutes though, so you better hurry up and get it while you can. It's not going to be on there much longer, and once it's gone, that's it. You lost your chance. It's going to be wiped from the internet. It's going to be erased from history. It's never going to be seen again, except it might be on YouTube in a couple weeks. No, I'm just kidding. It's on Patreon. It's staying on there. There's a ton of other stuff. You can also hear about Anthony Jeselnik's beef with Tim Dillon. That was a good one. Or you can hear about the time Patton Oswalt apologized for taking a picture with Dave Chappelle, and there are over 60 other videos on there. Make sure you go check it out. There's a link in the description, and then hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you at the next video.